Hi everyone and welcome to this week's video. This week I thought we would go on a tour of the garden and see which flowers have come into bloom in May and how we're getting on in the different flower patches and in the greenhouse as well. So the first thing that I wanted to show you was the rhododendrons because they are looking amazing. They've just started to flower just now, and this hot pink one is just absolutely fabulous, and it's really nice to see it at the entrance to the house. So I thought I'd just show you that before we get into the flower patch because it was just looking so amazing. There's something quite magical about coming back after time away and seeing your garden. I've just been down in London for a few days with my daughter after she finished her big exams, and I've come back and there's just been a huge amount of growth. I was only away for less than a week, and when I left we had the end of the tulips and the narcissi and the bluebells. Come back and they're all finished now, and instead we've got huge growth on our perennials, and just look at them, aren't they wonderful? So this amazing pink frothy perennial is Chaerophyllum hirsutum rosea, and it's absolutely fantastic in the garden. I love its colour. It reminds me a bit of cow parsley, very similar in its appearance, but just that different colour, and the bees absolutely love it. And you'll have noticed there beside it we've got those lovely blue cornflowers. They're perennial variety, and they're one of the first things to flower in my garden in the springtime from that perennial collection, and the buds just keep coming on it. We've got so many different ones coming through. They're a fantastic colour, and I've also got some purple ones as well that are a nice contrast elsewhere in the garden. Another thing that has been flowering has been my sweet cecily, which has this lovely ferny foliage which I like to use in arrangements as well. It is a bit prolific though, it can take over the bed, so I have to be a little bit careful of that. And this is lovely Jacob's ladder. This is a lovely pale blue one. Got some darker blues in the garden as well, and it's good for cutting. I love growing Aquilegia in the garden. It's also commonly known as Granny's Bonnet or Columbine, and there's lots of lovely varieties you can grow. I grow a lot of the Barlow series, so we've got pink varieties of that, and we've got blue ones, and we've got darker, kind of nearly black varieties of those, and they're fantastic for cutting. I use them a lot in arrangements at this time of year. And the other thing that's good about them is that they're a perennial that's really easy to grow from seed. So some perennials that I found more difficult are things like Ravenswing and Astrantia, just getting them to germinate. But Aquilegia found germinate really well and produce sturdy little plants. Have found that they won't necessarily flower for me in the first year, but in the following years they'll bulk up and produce really good flowers for me. I'm so excited to see this back flowering again. This is Ranunculus Pleno, and it flowers throughout May and into June for me each year. And it's got these lovely branching stems with lots of miniature double buttercup-like flowers that are pure white on the top, and they're just fabulous. They're brilliant for using in arrangements, and I've used them so often in bridal bouquets. And they're clump forming, so you can get quite a good decent clump after a few years with so many different flowers on them. Just fantastic flower. So just starting to flower this week is Hesperis in the garden, otherwise known as sweet rocket. And we've got lots and lots of these stems that are going to be flowering over the coming weeks, as you can see here. And lots of colours of them. There's lots of white that's just started to flower just now, but you can also get lilac-y colours as well, and very pale pinks too. And sweet rocket is a biennial, so that means that you sow the seeds just about this time of year now actually, and in the coming weeks in June, and then it puts down roots and it creates a nice leafy growth, and you plant it outside in your garden and it'll flower for you the following May. So we're going to have a look at biennials in the next couple of weeks while I sow the seeds, and I've also got a biennial video I did last year if you want to get a head start and find out a bit more about sowing those. So sweet rocket is kind of a little bit similar, I always think, to honesty, but honesty flowers first for me in the garden in April time, and then it is the Hesperis that comes for me after that. This is another May favourite of mine for using in bouquets, and it's called Ravenswing, and it's otherwise known as Anthriscus sylvestris. And I have grown these from seed, and it's taken me a wee while to get them established in the garden. It's one of the perennials that I find a little bit tricky to get to germinate, and actually quite often what I find is if I sow it in the autumn, nothing will happen, and then if I just leave it alone and give it occasional water, I come back in the spring, and that period of being cold and then warming up and then possibly getting cold again with the spring weather changing is enough to make it germinate after that. And once it's established germination and you get a seedling, then it'll grow away well for you. So it's worth persevering if you want to have a shot at trying to grow Ravenswing from seed, because it produces these lovely umbellifier flowers which are great for flower arranging. Camassia look really beautiful in the garden. They're a lovely colour, but they're quite short-lived. I had them just starting to come into flower before I went away, and then now that I've come back a week later, they are just starting to go over now, but they are very pretty. Getting into late May, it's the start of Allium time in the garden, and I'm growing a few different ones this year. We've got Purple Sensation, I've also got Purple Rain coming out, and I will have some drumstick Alliums coming out a bit later as well. And by having them in different areas in the garden, I can spread the flowering period as they come out at different times. They're fantastic in arrangements. You can use them fresh or you can dry them, and then they will last forever if you look after them well dried. And they do have a bit of a characteristic onion smell when cut, but the best way to minimise that is to change the water frequently in your vase. So you'll always get the best vase life from any flowers by changing the water every couple of days, but it's especially important if you've got alliums mixed in with your arrangement. Another of my top favourites is Astrantia, and we're just a week or so off, I would say, getting them into full flow, but there's just one or two that are starting to come out, but there's going to be lots and lots more over the coming weeks. And Astrantia is another one that is quite a tricky one to germinate from seed, but again, I found it similar to the Ravenswing. If you sow it in the autumn and you don't expect to see anything then, don't worry about it then. Just leave it over the winter time, occasional water, and then by the time you get to spring and it's starting to warm up and then chill down again over the evenings, you'll find that the Astrantia should start to germinate for you. Before I went away, my Aquilegia had not put on very much growth at all. But coming back now, it's really starting to get going, so that'll be exciting to see in the next few weeks. Again, like the Aquilegia is very easy to grow from seed and should germinate easily for you. This is Geum Maitai, and I really love it. It's a really pretty perennial flower to have in the garden, and again, you can use it in cutting for arrangements. It's lovely to see the lilac back in bloom in the garden. This is a lilac that's been here since before we moved into the house 10 years ago, and it's still flowering really well every year. This was gorgeous this year. It's white broom, and it's just coming to the end of its flowering period now, but it's so pretty I wanted to show it to you. So I'm really excited by how this flower patch is coming together now. This is the flower patch that caused me the most problems because I had planted a huge area of narcissi with no paths down the middle. So every time you wanted to harvest narcissi, you had to step on some of the flowers. And then I tried to grow flowers over the top of the narcissi once they'd finished, but again, there was no room, no paths for standing on, and you were always stepping on flowers when you didn't want to. So this winter I started creating new paths and new beds that are 1 metre wide and 25 metres in length, and they're now ready to plant into. So I had a few cornflowers that did manage to survive that December freeze and get through the winter, and it's been really exciting to see them just starting to flower in the last week. So we've got some pinks, blues and purples that are on their way just now. The support netting is in place to help them from the wind that we're getting at the moment, and that's just keeping them nice and upright, and there's no broken stems or stems flopping over. I've got some pink corn cockles that are just starting to come out, so this is the new ones for me this year that I haven't grown before. I've only ever grown the white and the dark purple, so these are looking really pretty. Planted out a lot of sweet peas, which are putting on a lot of good growth now, and they're going to start climbing up my canes and my netting that I have got in place to support them. If I got any autumn sown sweet peas through the winter, then they would be flowering about now, so we're going to have a bit of a delay, and I'm expecting probably flowers end of June, beginning of July from my January sown batches. So my earliest batches of hardy annuals that I got through the winter, which were sown back at the end of February, beginning of March, are outside planted in these patches. So I've got some salvia there that you can see. And I've got some bells of Ireland, still very, very small. These are tough ones to get to germinate for me, so I'm quite pleased I've got some plants, but they are still very small and needing just a bit of warmth and rain to get them growing. Got some calendula here as well. So I've got some March sown docus in here, and you might be able to see that there is some netting that is going in a low tunnel over the top of the plants. And I like to put this on when I'm getting the plants established outside, because I have got a bit of a pigeon problem. My pigeons like to sit in the flower beds and they like to nibble on any fresh leaves they can find. So until the plants are bigger and more established, then I will net them. And then when I think that they're getting bigger and at the stage where I think they need staking and they need the support netting on, then I will take the netting off and get that support netting in place. But just while they're getting used to the first couple of weeks outside, the netting does really help to keep pigeons off. So this is scabious in the garden as well that I did from an early spring sowing. And then we've got some Amimagus as well here. Never managed to get my Amimagus through the winter this year. So these will be slightly smaller plants in the end with slightly smaller flowers, but they'll still be really good for cutting. This is a different type of Ami that I'm growing. So the last one we just looked at was Amimagus, and this is Ami visnaga. And it's a more closed structure. It doesn't have that open, airy feel of Amimagus. It's got flowers that are closer together in the head, but very, very good for flower arranging. Also planted out in the garden, we have got Saponaria, and this is a really easy annual to grow from seed. It germinates really quickly, and it's got these lovely branching stems on it with lots of little flowers, and I grow them in white and pink varieties. And it's very similar to Gypsophila convent garden. And this is some overwintered docus that I did manage to get through, and it's much, much larger than the docus that you just saw under the netting. So it does make a big difference if you can get them through the winter. And this is Campanula here, which I've also managed to get through the winter, and it's just starting to put on some growth now. It's a bit slow. It's been out in the garden for a while, a bit dormant, but it's now getting going. Now there's some heat and sunshine. So over here in my other flower patch, things are in a bit of a transition because this is where I've had all my tulips. So now that they have come out of the bed, I'm going to be able to plant dahlias in their place. So it's really useful, this succession planting, where you can remove one plant that's finished and then carry on with the next plants that will bloom that year. So this is where all the tulips have been pulled for harvesting, and this week I'm just going down the bed and weeding and making sure it's all ready and mulched a bit for the dahlias going in next week. Down this area of the bed is another example of where succession planting will occur. This is Ranunculus, and when they've finished flowering, I will let the foliage die back, and then I will lift the corms and store them, and then I will put a late crop in its place, and it'll probably be sunflowers because they are very quick to go from seed to flowering, so that'll fill that gap nicely. So that's next week's plan, is to get the dahlias out. There is no more frost forecast. This week has been a little bit on the chilly side just first thing in the morning. It's not been as bad to cause a frost, but it has felt very cold and then it's warmed up. So I think just another week down the line and it'll be safe to put those dahlias out. So a few weeks ago I did a video on direct sowing out here in the garden in zone 8B in Scotland, and this is the third week in May now, and we're starting to get some germination from earlier sowings back at the end of April, beginning of May. So we've got some lovely larkspur coming up here, and then you can see some Linaria marocana, and then we have got some nigella coming through as well. Just a few nigella with buds on so far. We're a bit behind with the nigella this year due to the harsh winter, but there's also a lot of self-seeded nigella in the garden that are coming along, and I have a tendency to leave them to flower away. They don't actually take up much room in the flower beds, and if they're in a spot where it's not causing any harm to anything else, then I'll just leave them be, and they are bonus flowers. So I've got a succession of grasses, some that are planted out here in the garden that you can see, which are doing really well, and then I've got more that are hardening off, and I have got more that I've just sown, so that I'm hopefully going to have some grasses for my arrangements all through the summer and into the autumn. And they are fantastic to use to add texture and just something completely different. So I'm filming away at the moment, and once I've got enough footage of the whole process from seed sowing right through to using them in arrangements, I'll do a video on grasses to show you which ones I like to use when flower arranging. So this is some Polemonium I have got out in the garden. This is the largest that I have at the moment, and I've got smaller ones that are just coming along as well. Didn't manage to get any through the winter this year, so these are from an early spring batch that I had sown. So during April, the Polemonium didn't really do very much. It didn't put on a huge amount of growth, and then early May, still not much. And in the last week, it's really started to put on some growth here in Scotland. And I think we've just had a very cool spring again this year. It was the same last year, and then we're only just starting to get warm just now. One of the flowers that did survive the -15-degree temperatures in December was Orlea, and it's just starting to come out and flower just now. Also surviving the cold winter temperatures we had were cornflower, so these are all going to flower very soon. We've got the horizontal netting in place so that they can grow up through that to support them in any windy weather. Phacelia as well overwintered really well, and it's going to be flowering I think next week. We've got lots of good buds on them, but no colour in the buds yet, so we're just about a week away I think from cutting, and then they will be really good to use in arrangements and just really unusual. You can find out more about Phacelia in my Phacelia video that I did a few weeks ago about how to sow it, grow it and harvest it. So these are newly planted out annual asters that I've grown from seed in early spring, and I've just planted them out in the last week, given them a good water to get them established. Last year my asters were beautiful flowers but didn't have very long stems on them, so I'm hoping that they grow better this year. And I've been reading up about what a few other growers have said on different forums that I'm on, and a lot of people grow asters annually indoors in their polytunnels, and this isn't something that I've tried. I've always planted them outside. I am wondering whether I should cover them with a low caterpillar tunnel with some fleece, and then that might help with their growth. Have you grown annual asters outdoors and had any success with good stem length? It would be great to hear from you if you have. So the Ranunculus outside, we lost all of the autumn sown Ranunculus this year in that really cold December temperatures that we had that went down to -15 degrees. So I started a new batch in January that I pre-sprouted, and these have done really well. They're doing great in the garden. They've been planted out for a while, and I've had them under low fleece tunnels, but in the last week or so I've taken the fleece tunnels off because the weather has got a lot warmer. Ranunculus don't like too hot temperatures for flowering, so I thought that even by starting later batches this year it was still worthwhile. Being in Scotland, we have a very mild climate and we don't often reach high temperatures. Having said that, we very occasionally have the odd summer where we do just have amazing sunny weather. It happens about every 7 years or so, so we don't know what we're going to get this year, but I thought it was worthwhile just taking that chance that the weather would be cool enough for the Ranunculus and they'll flower well. At the moment I've just got 1 or 2 flowers out, but I'm hoping that in the next couple of weeks we'll get some good ones this year as well. So coming away from the flower patches now, back up outside the greenhouse, I've got lots of things hardening off. So they're all things that I've sown a bit later because they're more tender, things like my cosmos here, and they'll be able to get planted out next week. They're just coming to the end of their hardening off period, so they have about 10 days of hardening off, just getting used to the outside temperatures gradually and then going back in the greenhouse at night. And these cosmos here have been pinched out, which I'll show you a bit clearer just now. So here we are, there is the stem that I have cut, and then on either side there you can see the little bits of new foliage that are coming out that will grow into these new side branches. And by pinching out the cosmos plants, you're creating much bushier, sturdier plants which will be able to withstand the wind and things more easily and will create many more flowers for you than you would have had before. It will delay flowering by a couple of weeks, but it'll be really worthwhile. Other things that are getting hardened off outside are more annual asters, and we've got some statice as well that needs to get out and get planted next week too. They should start to thrive once they're out of their cells and into the garden soil at this time of year. Just need to make sure that I keep them well irrigated since it's drier weather at the moment. Other things that I am hardening off at the moment are my dahlias. So the ones that have come on the most I am getting hardened off, and then I've got others in the greenhouse as well that are not quite as far on, and I'll leave another week and then start hardening them off. There's also so many that it's too difficult to try and plant them all at once, so I spread them out over a number of weeks. So as well as pinching out cosmos, I have been pinching out the dahlias as well. So that means taking them back on the plant to just leaving a few pairs of true leaves that are growing, snipping out that growing point, and that will cause it to branch and create these side stems that you can see starting to grow here. And just like the cosmos, doing this will delay the flowering by a couple of weeks, but will create a much bushier, sturdier plant with lots more flowers in the end of the day. More information on how to do this can be found in my Pinching Out Dahlia video, and I'm going to leave a link to my Pinching Out playlist at the end of this video, so you can click on that for information on a wide range of flowers that I pinch out. So there's a lot going on inside the greenhouse just now. We've got lots of things outside and hardened off, but we've also got a lot of things that are still growing here as well. So we have got over here on this table lots of sunflowers that I've been growing from seed. I start these off in here so that they can get well established before going out in the garden, and that just helps stop any nibbling from slugs and snails being too damaging to them, and also they germinate better inside without the birds getting at the seeds. So I've got some in their 3-inch pots growing on, and they'll get hardened off next week and planted out. And then I've got more here in their seed tray that need to get potted on as well. I will keep sowing sunflower seeds every couple of weeks throughout June for a succession of flowers all season long. These are my zinnias that I planted in April, and they're starting to put on some nice growth now. When they're a wee bit bigger, I'll be able to pinch them out when they've got a good few sets of leaves on them, and I'll pinch them back so that they've got at least 2 to 3 pairs of leaves, and they'll start to bush out, and that'll create more flowers for me. These are looking good and can start to get hardened off probably in the next week or two, and then planted out after all risk of frost is gone. And I've got some more zinnias that I have sowed in the last few weeks as well that have germinated. At this time of year, when it's much warmer and there's lots of light, the seeds germinate so much faster. These zinnias have just popped up and really need to get potted on this week, so that's a good job for me in the greenhouse. You always need more succession sowings of flowers so you don't run out at the end of the season. So these are Ami Magus that are at an earlier stage than the ones that are planted out already and will flower for me later. So we'll get them hardened off once they've had a chance to grow on for another week or so and get a bit bigger. I'm so excited about these because these are my dahlias that I've grown from seed, and I've never grown dahlias from seed before, and I really didn't know what to expect, whether you would get decent plants that would flower, and these are doing really well so far. Have you tried growing dahlias from seed before? Have you had much success? How were the flowers within the first year? Let us know how you've got on with them. It would be really interesting to find out. I am going to get these hardened off and planted out, but not for a couple of weeks. I think I'll just leave them to grow on a little bit longer in the greenhouse. I've never grown Craspedia before, so I thought I'd try that this year. So it germinated well and it's growing on well in an 82 cell tray now. So we'll hopefully get that hardened off and in the garden soon. So as well as all those bigger plants that are growing on in their 82 cell trays or their 3-inch pots, I am still succession sowing lots of seeds so that we have them at the end of the season in that August-September time and into October. And I'm sowing less seeds, so I might put a few varieties together in one half seed tray and just make sure I label them well so that I know what's what. So my florists loved grasses last year, so I've been putting quite a few of those on. So those were the 5th of May, these ones have been grown, and then these were 10 days later on the 15th I put some more on as well. So hopefully that will help stretch out the grasses growing for me. I do find that I run out of cornflowers towards the end of the season, so I'm trying to keep succession sowing those a bit more this year so that I do have them in September, October time. And I've got some more Ami on, and I've got some more Gomphreno on, and I've got some more Buplerium and Orlea as well. Lots of other seeds on the go as well, more Status that'll need to get pricked out and potted on, and then we've got some Saponaria here as well. It's the same, it'll need to get pricked out and potted on too. Got more zinnia seedlings which really have germinated really quickly now the weather has warmed, and then we've got another batch of Ami Magus that I've started as well. Sunflowers get put on every couple of weeks at the moment so that we've got a plentiful supply all summer long. So all the succession seed sowing that we're doing just now is going to ensure that we have flowers right the way through to October. It will start to slow down a little bit in the coming weeks, and it'll be mostly sunflowers and phacelia that I will be growing, and will have done the final batches of these, and then I'll be on to sowing my biennial seeds. Thanks so much for watching today. I hope you enjoyed having a good look around the garden with me and saw all those lovely perennials that are starting to come back into bloom, and those very first annuals as well, those survivors from that great big frost in December, and those cornflowers that made it through, and the corncockles and the Orlea as well. So lots going on in the greenhouse too. There's going to be lots of planting out that needs to get done in the next couple of weeks. We're going to have to get the dahlias out next week, and also a lot more of those seedlings that are ready to go out. Start hardening off those zinnias and sunflowers as well. If you're interested in finding out more about pinching out, because this is a great time of year for doing it on some of your plants, so you can pinch out on your zinnias, you can pinch out on your cosmos, you can pinch out your snapdragons and your dahlias, then I have a playlist which is all about pinching out those different flowers, so you can check that out for a bit more information. And if you're enjoying my video series on this channel, then please do like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. It's great to have you following along. It's great getting all your comments every week, so please do keep them coming in, and I really enjoy finding out about what stage you're at in your garden. So for example, last week when we were looking at Nigella, lots of you got in touch with your comments, and it was great to find out who actually had Nigella blooming at this time of year. It's a little bit off from me, I haven't quite got it in bloom, but I can see some buds on some of the flowering stems, and also we found out about other things like that great yellow variety that I'd never heard of before that was grown in Australia called Transformer. So it's always great to find out about new flowers that you can grow. Next week we are going to be back in the garden again in the greenhouse, and we'll be having a look again at what is flowering, because every week it changes at the moment. We'll be having a look at how I've got on planting things out, and just how I'm getting on with this May gap. This is a tricky time of year for flowers, especially big focal ones. Now the tulips have finished. How are we getting on trying to provide enough flowers for florists and for orders with what we've got blooming in the garden? So join me then. Have a good week.